the Apple Watch just flashed on me and it said it's time that Beyond Belief Sobriety is live on Facebook. And as I was getting ready to say that, I was reminded of whenever Jethro would say what time it was on the Beverly Hillbillies, he'd say, well, the mouse's hand is on the one and the, well, anyway, I don't know why I thought of that. But that's just how far we've gone from the mouse's hands to the flashing Facebook. Hey, Anchor, how you doing? And welcome to our live stream. Angela, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm a little bit on the drowsy side. This week went by so fast.
Oh man, it did. It did. We were really busy at work too, and I was just kind of worn out today. Even though we get off early, I was just like, I don't know, just one of those days. I'm glad it's the weekend. Got a lot going on.
Yeah.
So.
And it's been a crazy week. Our podcast last week was...
Oh my God, that's right. Got to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, that was amazing. So we're up to close to 10,000 views of that live stream from last week. And it's really amazing. And not only that, like 80 people subscribed to the YouTube channel in the last week. And normally there's like 40 an entire month. But that obviously people were looking for that movie. They found our live stream and they stayed and they listened and they liked it.
Yeah.
And it was just really cool to see that. And people kind of learned about our channel from that. But you did a really good job, Angela, because you carried that conversation. You made that happen. You totally did.
It was a little crazy. The second day, you messaged me that there's like 2,000 people that have looked at it. I'm like, what? So I was totally scared going to it, like all the comments. I that usual part of thinking the worst, and it wasn't bad at all. It was mostly thumbs up. We got 2 thumbs down. That's better than my personal story.
That is funny.
Yeah,
that's a bummer when you get a thumbs down for your own personal
I know
story.
For my life story. Yeah, it's like, nope, don't like it. Well, I didn't either for a while, but yeah. Anyway, it's been an interesting week, that's for sure.
Someone says, boom, the Beatles started the same way.
Yeah. We're not going with the same haircuts. I'm sorry.
But could you imagine 10,000 people? What if there were like actually 10,000? I've never been in front of that many. If you were on a stage with 10,000 people in front of you, that would just be, that would freak me out totally, But fortunately, it's just like, anyway. Oh, well, that's going to be fun. So, every once in a while, a good idea for us for a topic is to pull one from Joe's book, Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings.
Oh, speaking of Joe, you were going to talk about his recent...
Yes. So before we get into the reading for today, you should know that Joe posted a blog on his Rebellion Dogs Radio website. Hey Joe, hey Anchor, who else is out there? We got about 10 people out there now, so welcome everyone. But anyway, Joe posted this this blog post about why all the God talk at an atheist agnostic AA meeting. And the essay that he wrote, it's like 18 pages on a PDF, but it's goes into a lot more detail. Hey Bill, a lot more detail than just, why all the God talk in an AA meeting, but it talks about, kind of the psychology that behind an AA meeting and so forth. And just a lot of stuff in there. I'm going to have to actually read it again, but I'm going to post a link there just so you guys can check it out because it really is pretty good. But I think that he was basically saying, oh, this is a huge long link. I don't know if this is going to work or not. Anyway, I'll post it there. I know, Joe, 18 pages. It's huge. And look at the link. I don't know if that's right or not. Anyway, don't try to write that down. That can't be the link. Anyway.
No, I don't think it is.
But there you go. Anyway, just go to his website, Rebellion Dogs Radio, and check it out. So anyway, I think he basically said, that didn't work. I'm sorry. We'll have to find a better link. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to his website and go there because that is definitely not it. But he basically was saying that, first of all, you have to go to a lot of meetings. You can't just go to one meeting or 2 meetings and say, oh, this is the way it always is at these meetings. So that's one thing. Here, I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the blog itself. There you go. This will work. This is better. This is better. And then he just says, "Here you go, Mango." And then he says that it's just that people have to bitch sometimes. People have to people have to complain. People have stuff to get off their chest. People, it's a way of processing stuff is to talk about it. So anyway, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I know that we've all experienced that before, going to a meeting, and sometimes there's a little bit of the little heavy on the God stuff or whatever. But
Yeah, sometimes it's just that people, if they're new to more secularly based meetings, it's like they feel, like they found their people, and so sometimes they, have to kind of let off some steam of
exactly.
what they've been through, because it can be, a little bit traumatic
Yeah.
for if you've, been preached to for a long time, or, somebody's been very dogmatic about what they think 12-step recovery is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And particularly if they think that it's supposed to look like a supernatural higher power of some sort, then yeah, when you find a meeting where people aren't, speaking in the same way, sometimes just being able to share how grateful you are that they don't do blah 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 blah,
Yeah.
is is what you do, because you're like, all right, yay,
Yeah.
and then most people get it out of their systems, and it goes to a more practical meeting, which is
Right.
what I think most of our meetings are, where it's just the real practical stuff that we do to stay in sobriety, and to be in recovery, and whatever that means to each person and stuff. So yeah,
When you
so
think about it
sometimes it
too,
happens.
it is a special purpose meeting, right? It's a special
Hmm.
purpose meeting for secular people, for an agnostic or
Yeah.
atheist, and so therefore,
Hmm.
that's the space for that kind of discussion to take place. So, like, if you are uncomfortable
Hmm.
at an AA meeting for whatever reason because of your belief system, or made to feel uncomfortable, or for whatever reason you're uncomfortable,
Hmm.
that's the place to talk about it, is at a special purpose meeting for that purpose, so that you can meet like-minded people who can say, yes, I also have experienced that, and we don't have to mess with that here.
Hmm.
So there's kind of a reason for that too.
Yeah.
Um but I don't know what's going on now with all the Zoom meetings, and maybe that's happening a lot more online now, since you're having so many people, finding a secular A meeting now for the first time, that weren't finding them before.
Yeah.
So that might be part of it.
Hmm.
Joe says he no longer brings that topic up or hardly entertains it at all. Total mindfuck conversation. Yeah, I hear you. So, shall we get into the topic for tonight?
Sure.
All right. And everyone, please, contribute with your make comments in the chat room as you always do, and feel free to call us at our toll-free number, 844-899-8278, and I'll put that up there for y'all. So we could certainly use the help to keep the conversation going. But we're just going to base the topic off of a reading from the August 6th reading from Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings for 12-Step Life. And I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen, and then I'll read it and we can talk about it. So let me go ahead and do that now. There we go. I don't know if you can read that or not, but we'll do our best. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we'll have a meeting about it. Mango, yes, we do. We do this every Friday, Mango, and we do it at if this is 5 o'clock your time, that's right. We do it at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. So every Friday we do this, and we have a different topic every week, and that's what we do. So anyway, here we go. August 6th. There are no facts, only interpretation. Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844 to 1900. The only problem with speaking the truth is that there are so many versions of it. We all have truths that are near and dear to us, but it is best not to declare that our interpretations are universal laws, or that we have some higher level of insight. Life, life, no, like life itself, I know. Like life itself, truth is best worn as a loose garment. An open mind isn't an empty mind, rather, it is a willingness to reconsider. Scientists who are certain are hard to come by. They remain skeptical even of their own theories. Recovery reveals, man, I'm having that really hard. Recovery reveals that being certain doesn't improve our chances of being right about an idea. There may have been a time when we thought the program had too many inconsistencies to be true. Then we thought it was too good to be true. Looking back, we can see how each fact we leaned on was merely an interpretation. In recovery, we are a fellowship of people with little in common. We have our afflictions, but they played out differently for each of us. Our commitments to better living are unique based on our individual designs for living or what our bottom line recovery is defined as. In addition to that, we each have styles, attitudes, and convictions that differ from one another. We aren't threatened by alternative perspectives. We learn from each other. We accept what people say because it is true for them. We take what we like and leave the rest. We are careful not to discard contrary views rashly, and we try not to be quick to judge. My truth doesn't trump anyone else's. Does
It widens
remembering
it.
was that
Nothing.
my truth does not trump anyone else's. Does remembering viva la difference keep my mind open to the wisdom of others? In fact, not that long ago, I lived by facts of life that I don't even consider sound interpretations now. Today, I do take what I speak of as the truth with a grain of, oh, that's a question. I'm having a really hard time with this. Today, do I take what I speak of as the truth with a grain of salt? Question. So there you go. And I'm sorry I mangled that so badly, but I hope that you understood the gist of what he's writing about there. It's all about what is the truth and what is having an open mind. Angela, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's about being open-minded, and certainly about perspective, and getting perspective. I like that the open mind isn't an empty mind. Rather, it's a willingness to reconsider. That the idea that I think we talk about it in recovery as humility. The idea that we only have part of the truth, or that what works for me may not work for somebody else. That's what we have to offer, is not our expertise on something. It's just what has worked for us, and then we can share that, and other people, if they think it might work for them, they can try it out. That sort of thing, rather than that we're experts on recovery or experts on sobriety or anything like that. And I think in the second part of it, he highlights that in recovery we're a fellowship of people with little in common, and that that our afflictions have played out differently for each person. I think that in a lot of the 12-step recovery, the ideal, or the what they're hoping for, is that we aren't threatened by alternative perspectives. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. Just as our country, the U.S. particularly, has become more polarized and dogmatic, so has a lot of the recovery community. And so that's where this is kind of helpful to remind us that really at the core of most of 12-step recovery, it's that we want to be open-minded. You can see that more within the service structure, usually, like at conferences and stuff, when they have votes, and listening to the minority opinion, and then revotes and stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of an arduous process for some of us who like to just get things done, because that's not how it's done. But I think that this, is what it's all about, is the truly considering different points of view and being willing to adjust your perspective on what somebody else brings up. And I think that it's, with society as it is at the moment. We are so conditioned by social media to be triggered so easily that it's sometimes hard for us to remember how to consider, that we could be wrong on something, or
Right.
that people who are guiding us or that we look up to could, not be correct or be off a little bit. And so I think that that's what, he's really talking about here, is that the considering that,
Hmm.
that maybe there's a different perspective, maybe there's a different way to see a situation, and that we tend to do better in our recovery when we don't hold on to something too tightly. I think I've mentioned before the Ziggy comic that I had. That's, the book is entitled "Never Get Too Personally Involved in Your Own Life."
Hmm.
And it's really, kind of that, it's very Buddhist philosophy as well, of
Hmm.
impermanence and letting go of attachment. I think that's, at least in my own life, where I tend to run into the most difficulties if I have an attachment to a certain belief or a certain view of a situation. Particularly if my feelings have been hurt, then I'm usually greatly attached to how somebody has wronged me in some way. That I have to use some of these tools to go through and figure out where my part is at in a situation, and sometimes it's not that I had a part. It could be that somebody truly did do something that was unkind to hurt me, but my part is then replaying the story of them hurting me over and over again until it builds into a resentment, rather than being able to go to some ideas like, this person is hurt, maybe what they said or did, even if it was directed to me, it may have nothing to do with me at all. It could just
Hmm.
be something going on with them, and I was the target, and then I get to choose if I want to continue that resentment or not. But, it's, I think, about the idea of being open to the fact that you might not be correct in your interpretation of whatever the conversation or situation is. And so I like that as a way of looking at this, because when you look at just the quote, the Nietzsche quote, there are
Hmm.
no facts, only interpretations. I mean, technically that's true, but it does create a lot of problems in
Mm.
society,
True.
which we see right now, which is that it's a post-truth kind of thing out there, and that
True.
everybody has their own truths. And I just did air quotes for
Hmm.
for those listening. But I think there's a slight difference in there, at least
Yeah.
in my interpretation of the reading, that
Yes.
yeah, there is some things that we can agree upon, and there's probably an argument to be made for sense making in general right now. But I think this particular reading is more about, as we move within recovery,
Right.
and that it's specifically geared towards us developing relationship and being able to grow, because it's very difficult to continue to grow in recovery and intelligence and emotional depth if you don't think that anybody has anything to offer you, if you already know it.
Hmm.
And so keeping an open mind, that yeah, that and being curious, I think that's really where I stand. I don't know that I say open-minded as much,
Mm.
because it's kind of a term similar to free thinker,
Hmm.
when WAFT, or WAFT as it
Hmm.
became, um, was going through all of that. At the time, I identified very much, atheist,
Hmm.
but it wasn't a big deal to me not to have the extra A in
Right.
the
Right.
WAFT,
Right. Same
which,
here.
for those of you who weren't around, it was stood for We Agnostics Free Thinkers.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then it went into in AA or something like that, because
Right.
it turned into like WAFDIAC, and just anyway, it was a pain, and so so the people decided to just change it to secular, because that encompasses most
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But the thing was that, I considered myself, a free thinker among that acronym.
Mm-hmm.
And so it didn't matter to me, whether atheist was in there or not.
Right.
And so, free thinker is another thing, along with open-minded, that can sometimes have multiple interpretations, or be considered like you don't have any sort of moral compass, or certain moral, guidance, because you're a free thinker, so anything goes, which isn't, my experience. Maybe it is for
Right.
some people, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm taking from all of this is that to be a free thinker, or I mean, open-minded, is to be willing to see, take perspective, and consider other
Mm-hmm.
ideas.
I'm glad that you mentioned that about the minority opinion. I think that's my very favorite part of the whole AA service structure thing, because I have seen that happen, and it's not like, I don't know, maybe once I've seen it change a vote completely, but
Hmm.
most of the time it doesn't actually change the majority view, but it does change individual people's views. But what I really like about it is that I get the sense, at least at the area assembly that I went to where this was done, is that people were seriously listening to the minority and really taking in what they were saying,
Hmm.
with the idea that they might be bringing perspective and information to this topic that I did not previously consider. And
Right.
it's really done very respectfully, and I myself have been the minority who was listened to, and I felt
Hmm.
like I was listened to and respected, and it just means
Hmm.
everything. So that's a great feature of AA. And you're right. It's like it slows everything down,
Yeah, it takes a
totally.
long time to
you
make
know,
a decision on anything. Yeah,
but
it's painful. It is
it
seriously
can be.
painful. I mean,
Yeah.
still think it's a good idea,
Yes.
and very effective for being able to, yeah, to have the minority
Hey,
opinion
it's better
heard.
than a filibuster, right?
Right, exactly. But still, man,
I know
it
that,
can
and
be
then
tough
the
to
the
sit
voting
through.
thing that they do, the third legacy voting thing that they do.
Yes. Oh
Hmm.
my gosh. Whew. Yeah. Yeah. It's rough.
Yeah.
It's rough for, those of us in current society that are so used to like standing meetings only,
Right.
like we're standing here and getting this done, and we do it quickly so nobody can sit down until we're done. And
Uh-huh.
and then you go to one of these things and you're like, "Oh my gosh.
I like what
Will this
excuse me.
ever happen?"
I like what you said too about kind of understanding the concept of open mindedness anyway, and free
Hmm.
thinker, and how sometimes like I might think about those things differently, or have a different connotation that isn't really
Hmm.
intended for the word free thinker. Another word that I was thinking about was skeptic or skepticism.
Hmm.
It's like, but skepticism is somewhat related to this, I think. Being a
Mm.
skeptic is like, the way I see it is like thinking critically
Mhm,
about something, being open to new information, understanding that whatever my belief is about something is subject to change with new information.
mhm,
And that I might even be skeptical of what someone else's belief is. So that if someone else
mhm,
comes to me and says, this is my view on whatever, that I might want to get some more information about that or whatever. Now, the thing is, though, that's great for things that can be weighed
mhm.
with facts, but a person's journey in recovery it doesn't necessarily that. So that's
Right.
the thing. Like, so if you're talking about your personal experience with recovery,
Mhm,
and how you feel about that, or what you've learned about that, or even your
mhm.
opinion of that personal experience,
Yeah.
that's not really, when I put that out there, that's not really up for debate. I mean, you might have a
Yeah.
different experience. Someone might have a different experience from me, or a different view of the experience, or whatever, or
Mhm,
understand it differently. But that doesn't mean that whatever my view is at that time of my experience is wrong or anything. So and then that's that whole thing gets kind of weird too. because it's like, we do learn as people. We do learn as
Mhm,
people in recovery. And my understanding of my own personal story has
mhm,
evolved and changed.
right,
The lessons that I draw from my own story.
mhm,
I continue to learn all the time. So I don't know what I'm trying to say with that. It's just that there are some things I think where you can apply a skeptic's view where
mhm,
it's very appropriate. And
mhm.
then there are other times where it's like, this is just this person's experience, and you respect that. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that, with the skeptic, that, yeah, it can be seen as critical, or, not being open to new ideas.
Right.
But, it also can be seen as not taking everything at face value, not
Exactly.
buying into dogma as well,
True.
so most of the time, I guess, for things within the meetings, like, how to run a meeting, or, what kind of meeting to have, things like that. I feel, I'm very open about. I don't have any sort of, real rigid belief on on how things should be done. But then if somebody were to come to me and say, well, it says here in the big book that you have to do the
Yeah.
steps, exactly as written, and then I'd be skeptical about that,
Yes.
because that's not my belief. So a lot of it does still, hinge on personal belief, and
Mhm.
usually personal belief is, stemmed from experience,
Yep.
and then that goes back to, what are our experiences. They're the stories that we tell ourselves about stuff that, has happened, real or perceived, and so then that goes back to the truth, because there are some things, as I went through the steps, that I wrote down, I was resentful for, or things that happened in my life, and I had a story about them. And then when I looked at it closer, it was possible that I misinterpreted, something that happened. I mean, you can even see it within families. Like if you gather for family dinner and somebody tells a story from, when you were younger, and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
your sibling can be telling the story, and you were
Exactly.
there, and you have a completely different version of what happened.
Totally. Yep.
From the smells to who said what and what happened next, and all of that. And so, so yeah, so I think it's just really interesting, the intersection between, facts and perceptions, and memories, truths, beliefs. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
It's funny that you say that about families. That is so true, and there's a lot that comes into play there. But I have that experience with my sister all the time. And then I think she's like 5 years older than me, and so she had a whole different perspective and relationship with my parents than I did, and everything. So, yeah, we have totally different memories. I'm like, did we have the same parents? Did we really grow up in the same house?
Right.
Like, I don't remember it that way, but anyway, but yeah, that is pretty interesting. But I was also thinking too, as you were talking about um, how how we are in a meeting. Like if someone comes to you and they say, "Well, the big book says so, this must be right," and that we might want to bring a skeptic's mind to that. And I totally agree with you. That was absolutely not encouraged when I was a newcomer. That was not. I don't know if you had the experience. Well, and you didn't, because you went to a secular group from the beginning.
No, no, I didn't.
You
I
didn't?
created one.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
no, I was in, just the average run of the mill meetings,
That's right.
for my first year and a half or
Okay.
so. Yeah, first 18 months, I guess. Yeah, it would have been
S
18 months,
so
because
you
we started the atheist, agnostics, and
That's
all
right.
others meeting in
That's right.
January of 2008.
So did
Yeah.
you have that
So
experience where people kinda discouraged you from thinking critically
oh,
about
yeah,
things?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I also, to be honest, probably antagonized them,
Yeah.
because they would, like, ask me to read, how it works, which, I really don't think is a great way to
Uh-huh.
introduce people to
Well, it's not. It really
12-step
isn't.
recovery. But yeah, they'd ask me to read how it works. And so I'd change everything
Oh my
in
God.
it to gender and deity neutral. And, some people were just, they didn't care. Either they didn't hear it, or, it just, whatever. It wasn't important to them. But there's some people that came up to me afterwards, and one woman with the big book and had it pulled to the pages to show me the exact words of, he and God and,
Right.
all of that kind of stuff. And
Wow.
so, yeah, so for some people, they really find that to be a sacred text, and were, upset that I did not.
Yep.
Fortunately, those people were in the minority of where I live, and that the
Uh-huh.
majority either enjoyed hearing it a different way, because some of them, it hadn't occurred to them that they could
Cool.
just change the words.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just it just kind of like the meetings where it hadn't occurred to them that they
Mhm.
could end in something except the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
And so for some people, it's not that they are
Uh-huh.
just so ingrained in the Lord's Prayer that they love it so much. It's just that it hadn't occurred to them because they'd never experienced a meeting where that wasn't said at the end.
Yeah.
So that's what I think I saw with reading it and using different terms, and so most of the places that really didn't care would continue to ask me to read, and the ones that really had an investment in the words that were written would not ask me to read. And
Yeah.
so, because I think one time they had asked me to, could you please read it as stated, and I said no, and so they asked somebody else.
Good for you.
And same with ending in the Lord's Prayer. Somebody was like, Angela, will you take us out with the Lord's Prayer? And I said no.
No.
And there was just the silence, and some people like gasped, were like,
That's hilarious.
and so fortunately the person recovered and said, okay, so and so, will you take us out with the Serenity Prayer? And they did. And
Mhm.
so and fortunately, again, most of my community, for a
Yeah.
long time was familiar with me, and so it wasn't taken
Yeah.
as super personal or anything.
Cool.
But they got to learn that I have some boundaries,
Yeah.
and
That's pretty
and
good.
that I'm comfortable with just saying no.
Yep.
And that's another thing that sometimes in AA meetings or in recovery type meetings, 12-step meetings, there we've talked about different phrases that we don't care for, and one of them is that you'd never say no to an AA
Mhm.
request, an
Mhm.
AA service request. And yeah, and I'm not into that. It's like, no, part of my recovery and my work in sobriety has been learning to say no and to set boundaries.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's interesting. But
It
yeah,
is.
I did have some people who were, like I said, not happy
Mhm.
with my interpretation
Mhm.
of how it works, um, and so voiced that. But again, they were in the great minority. I mean, there was
Yeah.
only like maybe 2 or 3 people who actually challenged me on it, and yeah, and so I got to learn that they were not the people that I wanted to model my recovery after, because this was like in my early recovery and probably the first uh, 3 months, and so I took note that, well, one, I wasn't ever going to say something like that to a newcomer in general, but just the feeling of having somebody with double-digit sobriety come up to me and tell me, really just be in my face on how this needs to be read. I didn't want to make anybody feel that
No.
way or have to be as defensive as I was. For her, or I guess for me, I had already made a commitment that I was going to stay sober just to spite people like that. And so, yeah, so I did. But not everybody has that as part of their early recovery mission statement,
Right.
that I'm just going to stay sober to spite all the people in AA who say you can't do it without getting God. And so I felt, that it was irresponsible of that person because, had it been pretty much, anyone else during that time, that might have sent them out. That might have been the fuck it, for
Right.
them.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't for me. It just, made my spite pledge that much stronger.
Well, there was certainly a lot of talk about open-mindedness in my early days there as a newcomer in AA. A lot of talk about it, but the assumption was that there was something wrong with whatever my thoughts were,
Mm,
and I really needed to open my mind up that my
mm,
thoughts were screwed up, and that maybe what the big book says and all the stuff I'm hearing in meetings is what I need to open my mind up to. And if, so there was like, yes, you open your mind up to this, but it wasn't like you could, if you were to do what you did, you could say, yes, I'm going to open my mind up to it. And you know what? I decided this is BS.
mhm,
That they would just tell me my mind was closed. That was the kind of the weird thing about it. But and I've talked about this before, and I just kind of look back in this period of my life, and I just kind of shake my head, like, what the hell was I doing? But I just said, okay, well, I guess you're right, and I'm just going to kind of somehow, make this work and go along with it, and open my mind up to all this kind of crap that I couldn't really swallow. But that is what I did, and that can be damaging. I just
mhm,
it is dangerous to if you're going to be open minded, if you're going to
mhm,
encourage people to be open minded, you need to give them the freedom to let their open mind take them where it will. So that if their open mind says, "Yeah, you know what, I'm open minded," and I've come to the conclusion this is bullshit, you should be able to
right.
respect that. Say, yeah, okay, well, and it is totally okay, but yeah, it wasn't the idea is that you open your mind, but it can only go in one direction is basically the way that it worked out. So
Yeah,
I think it's
I
more
recall
healthy
that.
to have a
Yeah.
skeptical view. To if you were, if I could do what you were talking about back
Mhm,
then, go back to my old self, my younger person, and say, you know what they're telling you about this big book and all this stuff. I know it seems weird. Maybe it's because it is weird, and you can get some information. It's okay. You don't have to see things the way everybody else does, and I think that's
mhm,
part of this whole thing that Joe's talking about in this reading is that you know be respectful of different perspectives and including your own. I think that it's okay for me to have a perspective that might be different than someone else's or from the groups as a whole.
mhm,
I might want to keep in mind that maybe people can bring new information that could change my mind, and I like to think that I'm that way today.
mhm,
But at the same time, though, it's okay for me to have my own values like you did, say, no, I don't want to do the Lord's Prayer, or no, that's not okay for me. It's okay
mhm.
to do that too. So yeah, kind of interesting. That's really interesting stuff that you brought up there, I gotta tell you.
Yeah. And I see Bobbert has said, I'd rather have a meeting close with the meeting is over, go out and enjoy your
Enjoy your
life.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Our meeting kind of does that. We just, our
Yeah.
Zoom meeting just says, thanks for joining the meeting, and hopefully we'll see you, next Tuesday or Thursday. But yeah, I would take out the enjoy your life, because automatically when I see that, if somebody said enjoy your life, I'd be like, don't boss me. So
Right.
it's just a reflex,
Yeah.
it just really is a reflex. I don't even
Yeah.
like it when they say it on the store, announcements and stuff like that. Like, and have a nice day. Don't tell me what to do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, but
it is
yeah,
kind of a
just
weird thing to say because you don't really know what's going on in a particular person's life. It might not be
right.
possible to have for them
Yeah,
to
yeah.
have a good
Go
day.
and
That
enjoy your life. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Go and enjoy your sad life.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, you're a
So
loser.
yeah,
No.
no, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
We made that. We didn't when we started our group. We didn't have any kind of formal closing at all, and I'm kind of glad that we didn't. And
yeah.
it works out okay. You say, hey, thanks everybody for coming to the meeting, and that was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, before COVID, we did have a closing, but it was It was, I put my hand in yours, and together we can do what we can never do alone. And so, so we did the whole holding hands, and then, said that. And a lot of that was, again, this was 2008, and we didn't want to, stand out too much from our community, because, this is Idaho.
Right.
And so, yeah, so we did, use the meeting template that I think we got the one from like a New York group. So we did a version of that. And then we did, use a different version of the 12 steps during the middle of the meeting, passing the basket and stuff. So that was a little risque.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, at the end, we talked about, changing that the last few years before COVID, because there's some of us that aren't into chanting in groups, but other people in the group during the business meetings said that that was something that was important to them, not necessarily the chanting, but like the holding hands and the togetherness. And for some people, that was sometimes the first physical contact they had with somebody that day, and so, little points like that were made. And so we decided at that time that we would, keep the little chant and stuff. And, people would still at the end do the keep coming back, it works if you work it, and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so, there was a place for it. And I think, it's up to different groups, to decide what they want to do. And I guess that is one thing that I'm sort of, appreciative of, that, I probably won't have to hold hands and chant anytime in probably the next 2 years.
Sure.
So, so we do have that. But, like I said, it was a good way for people who were coming to our meeting from traditional meetings to still feel that there was, some familiarity in the way that our meeting fit into the AA community. So yeah, but now if I started another group, I don't know that I do that.
Yeah.
And, a lot of that is just that things have changed in the last few years. It is, there's, so much more out there, and I've changed.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, I would, if somebody came to the meeting and talked about, that they, still smoked pot, or, had, were, on medically assisted or anything like that, or were skeptical about, some of the language still, because sometimes people would read a version of the 12 steps in the middle that did have more of a spiritual slant to it or something, we would chat with them, and I'd offer, all the resources that I could think of different programs and different things that they could look for, to help them in recovery, whether it's, going to see an addiction specialist as a counselor, or going to a smart recovery, or going to, one of the Buddhist groups. I'd try to direct them because, in my mind, I'm not trying to attract people to AA. I'm trying,
Exactly.
hopefully, being, some sort of a guide to what recovery could look like, and it may not be what, everybody else wants, my version, or, how I do recovery, but, to help them find something that works for them. And that's, I think, the core of, my service, or my ideas of service within recovery, is that's, my goal, and that I'm uniquely qualified to do that, because I've been to the depths of despair and frustration and discouragement and, sadness and deep shame for, my behavior and not being able to stop drinking when I knew how damaging it was to my life and my body. And so, yeah, meeting somebody there and being able to, help them see that there's more options than they may know about, is just part of, my recovery and what it means for me to be and stay sober.
That's a
is
good
to,
approach, I think.
yeah.
It's a really good approach. It's much better too for it's better for everybody because no, if you're trying to sell someone on AA, they can pick up on it right away. And I don't know how many times I've done that myself, where I'm thinking that, and maybe AA was the only game in town, but I'm thinking this is
Mhm,
the only game in town. You got to convince this
mhm.
guy this is where you want to come. But
Right.
but there are other places, there are other resources, a lot of
Mhm,
resources to help people with all kinds of different things. So
mhm.
yeah, you're absolutely right. That's what I would do today too, is try to, make people aware of different resources that they can avail themselves of, and to use as many resources as they can or want. Um,
Right. Yeah, because I think
I
that, part of the thing that I felt was, well, one, there wasn't any other resources
yeah, I
in
don't think there
town.
was that much, was
There
there?
really, yeah, and particularly affordable
Right. That was the thing.
resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't have the money, and I didn't have the health insurance, and
Right.
any of that kind of stuff. And so yeah, so I needed something that was free and
Hmm.
preferably gave me snacks.
Right.
And and I found that within 12-step groups.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I do think that there's still a place for it, which is why I'm still a part of the membership as a whole,
Hmm.
because yeah, there isn't a widespread type of recovery like AA, that is something else yet. So AA is still the first thing that people go to when they're looking for something that is free. And sometimes they come to it because they don't want to tell their doctor or insurance
Right.
company or whatever, and sometimes they come to it because they don't have any of those things.
Hmm.
And so I think that it's a good jumping off spot for some people that are looking to get help. So I like that, at least in our meeting, we're very open about seeking outside resources for just about everything. So we come to the group to share with each other, and to support each other, and just talking with somebody else who's been in the spots that you have, maybe not exactly the same circumstances, but the feelings, the emotions that you felt, is very beneficial. And so I think that's where it really shines, is that the community can be there. But as far as continuing to grow and develop through life, I think that requires more resources than just 12-step groups. So
Yep. I totally agree. I totally agree. In fact, that's been my experience too, is that that's that was just a start for me. AA was just a start for me, and from that, I was able to get well enough to understand that there are other things I needed to pay attention to. I had a long, painfully slow process getting to that point, but I did eventually get there. But absolutely, that's one of the critical things about, I think, when we do stop our addiction, practicing, whether we're drinking or drugging or whatever, is that once you take that away, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And I know in the beginning for me, I certainly seemed overwhelming. I didn't even know, it's just like it's a lot, but you just do one step at a time and one foot in front of the other. And like for a lot of us, for me, get those basics, my basic life needs straightened out, took a while. And after I got that done, which took a few years, then I was able to
mhm.
address some of the other things. But yeah, absolutely, the AA was good for me to get my feet on the ground, have the community and support, so that I could go on with my life and start getting better. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it
but there
gives
was
you
definitely other
example.
resources that
Yeah.
did that too.
Yeah, but it's really good to show you lots of different examples of what
Yeah,
a sober life could look like, and some of them
yeah,
you don't
that's
want.
true. That's
but
true.
but for me, it really was. Okay, so these people have employment that they like. They have careers, not just a job. They have housing. They've bought a house. They have things going for them, and that's what I wanted, was something along those lines, where I wasn't feeling like I was just surviving,
Mhm.
each day, but thriving, that kind of a thing. And so it was super, super helpful for that, to be able to see the different examples of how people lived in recovery. So that's kind of another cool aspect about the community as a whole. The uncool is that, yeah, some things get dogmatic, and people are at different places at different times. I think you and I have both talked about, like, I don't know, year 10 or something, that we had this thing down, and we could tell
Right,
anybody
right.
and everybody, they
Yeah.
like come to a meeting and they're like, oh, I'm dealing with this. And you're like, okay, you
Oh
just bring your
God.
own keys to the party, and you bring your own water bottle, and you bring a friend, and you
Uh-huh.
arrive early, and or you arrive late, you leave early, and yeah, and so, yeah, just the whole know-it-all period.
Oh
and
God,
and so, yeah,
yeah.
so I think some things come out of that, and so part of the interpretations here, and the open-mindedness and stuff, can be within that, as well as that, our fellow people walking through recovery, and sometimes you just kind of got to let people get that out of their system as well. So it may not be the God stuff. It may be that they're just in the I know everything phase, and I'll help everybody, and then they'll move through that, and get to be where we're at, where we don't know anything, and figuring out that, yeah, all we have to offer is what we've actually done, and maybe it'll be helpful to somebody, and maybe it won't, but we share it, and that's about it.
I was just thinking, I'm so glad that they didn't have podcasts back when I was going through that I knew everything phase, and that I didn't
Right.
have a podcast because I would have to
Yeah.
listen to myself, you
Yeah.
know.
No, I had so many people say, "You should really write a book, you should write a new book, a new version of the 12 steps," and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I thought I could,
Mhm.
multiple times,
Mhm.
and every time I think about that, I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, if I would have written a book at, 2 years sober, it would have been different than the one I would have written at 6 years, and
Yeah. Oh
different than the
yeah.
one at," and so I'm like, so I'm pretty sure, well, even our podcast, even the
Mhm.
version of the
Yep.
12 steps that we did
Yep.
together, I think differently about now than I
Sure
did.
do.
And that was what, 3 years ago or
Yep.
something, that we posted those.
Yep.
And there's still, useful information in there.
Yes.
I don't want you to pull them or anything,
No.
but, I've, even evolved in
I
that
know.
time. And so, yeah, so I'm sure that, we're going to, these are going to be around for, probably way too long. And we're going to come back and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I
Oh
thought
yeah.
that
Oh
way, or I
yeah.
can't believe that I said that, and I thought I was so smart, or
Yep.
I thought I was really being humble, or whatever, and like,
Well,
oh,
it
so
does happen to
embarrassing.
me every once in a while. Someone will listen to an episode from, like, 5 years ago or whatever, and where
Mhm,
I had really a core belief that I felt really deeply at the time about some damn
mhm,
thing, and was really sincere about it at the
mhm.
time, and I just don't have that belief anymore. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, it's kind of weird to have that frozen in time deals. But people
mhm,
understand though too that people do evolve too. But yeah, it's funny
yeah,
when you have yourself on record like that. That
right.
in a way it's good though, because you can see where you have changed and evolved, and you can kind of
Right.
figure out why and how and all of that. But
Yeah.
speaking of the 12 steps, and I'm at a point in my life now where I'm okay with them. Do them, don't do them. I'm pretty laid back about the whole thing.
Mhm,
I really totally am, but I don't devalue them. I still
mhm,
find incredible value in them. And I think one of the strengths of the 12 steps, what's so rich about them, is that they will grow with you over time. My relationship with those steps has not been the same since the moment I walked into the door to where I'm at today,
mhm,
and I'm sure that will continue. And what's really weird too, I'm not really like I don't think in terms of steps now
mhm,
even, but there's still there's still part of my being, I guess. So I'm never gonna be one of these anti-step people. I
Mhm,
would be a person that says caution, maybe,
mhm,
be careful with them, with how you approach them, perhaps.
mhm.
Um, but I don't think I'd ever be an anti-step person. I'm an anti-dogmatic step person,
Yeah.
you know. But interesting. Trudy has a comment. She says it's off topic, and I love off topic stuff. I told my daughter about the wisdom of trauma movie. She loved it. That was a really good movie, and is going to watch it again. She's an ICU nurse who so sees the outcome of addiction/trauma. Boy, that
Oh,
really was
great.
an amazing film.
Yeah,
I'm glad that we did that. That was a
yeah,
really great episode. And I know a lot of people had that same experience, Trudy, of
mhm.
watching that movie and getting so much out of it. Really
Yeah.
good job that they did with that.
Right. Yeah, and I like in the movie, we didn't talk about it too much, but there is that section where the social worker in San Francisco talks about secondary trauma,
Mm.
and that's something I know several people. I have a friend that's an ICU nurse as well, and that she sees a special counselor that works with her on stuff from her work, and so she goes to her to help learn skills, and do some basically trauma work just from the stuff that she sees at work, so that she doesn't experience such severe secondary trauma. So I highly recommend that nurses and health professionals and people that are involved with people who are in addiction frequently, or suffering from the the outcomes of addiction, see some specialist in that area, so that they can learn these tools to help not take that home with them, or not have it be as severe.
Okay, Mango asked the question. You might want to have to help me with this answer. I'll do my
Mhm,
best. What do you mean by the dogmatic way of the steps, or however you worded it? I guess what I mean by that, Mango, I'm not dogmatic about the steps, and that I don't. First of all, I think that we should be careful when we approach the steps, as if we think that they're going to fix us, that they're the magical bullet, that if I just do these things exactly right in this certain way, that I'm going to know happiness and bliss and all this other stuff. I think that's kind of a dangerous thought place to be. So I'm not
right.
dogmatic in the sense that I say that these things must be done for
Mhm,
you to experience your recovery. In fact, I think that that the steps are more experiential than anything else, and that and that's basically what they are. When you read those steps, those are the words of some other people who have had an experience, and they're describing their experience with those words. And I have an experience that is similar to theirs, but I describe it differently, and I don't necessarily have to put numbers on them anymore, but I can. So I guess that's maybe what I'm thinking about when I'm saying I'm not as dogmatic. I'm not as I guess I'm not insistent that I would not want to be insistent that they have to be worked at all. Put it that way.
yeah.
And I think that they're good, um, and valuable. They're good. I'm not saying that they're negative or bad, but they're not necessary. Put it that way.
Yeah, and I think when I'm talking about dogmatic way of the steps, is that you have to do it word for word the way it was written
Yeah.
in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because particularly for women, it can be a traumatic experience to go through the steps exactly as they're
Mhm.
written in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because part of the fourth step is ego deflation. And because, in the history of AA, the men who started it were usually men of some sort of status. And so they actually really needed the ego deflation in order to come to a realization that they had a problem that needed to be fixed. But, in present day society, both men and women, most of us don't need that kind of ego deflation. And so working the steps as written, exactly in, as we say, a dogmatic way, can be damaging. And so that's, why neither of us are really into to doing the steps in that way. We're more of the spirit of the steps, what are the principles? And there's lots of different interpretations that speak to people a bit more. There's a woman's way through the 12 steps. I can't remember her name, Stephanie something. I think that's a good one. I have often used the secular guide, an alternative guide to the 12 steps. And then there's, the Getting Sober Without God has a version. There's, quite a few different versions that many people have found a bit more helpful because they're updated and they're a little more trauma informed.
That was a really good question, Mango. I appreciate that. It's going to give me something to think about. Maybe that will be a good episode for the future sometime to talk about that. How the way we feel about the steps has changed so much, and our approach, and what is a dogmatic approach to the steps is a really good question. But yeah, I just know that the way that I talk about them and feel about them and experience them and all of that has really changed a lot. Just in the last couple of years. But yeah, good question.
Being open-minded.
It is being open-minded. Absolutely it is.
Yeah, we tied it all together.
Yes, we did. We did indeed. So, hey, thanks everybody. And Stephen, you kind of joined the party late, but one nice thing about YouTube, you can always listen to it later. Or maybe you've been here the entire time and just said hello later. I don't know. But it was nice to have you here. And good to see everybody. It's been a lot of fun. And Bree, I hope you're doing okay with your back pain. And anyway, I guess we're going to go ahead and close out. I'm going to go ahead and do my favorite music to close. All right, everyone. See you next Friday, 7:00 p.m., whatever that might be where you live. And we'll be doing another live stream. Until then, y'all take care. Be well. Be back again real soon. Bye-bye. Bye, Barb.